Yeah. Yeah, so there will be multiple requests from the people who are who want you to accept their
Yes, they will be admitted,
request to join this event.
of course.
Thank you so much. Okay. I'll be back in a moment, please. Thank you. Please allow me.
We welcome Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi. Welcome, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Welcome, madam.
You and all the other colleagues.
Yes, probably we'll wait for a couple of more minutes before we start this webinar.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Is it Her Excellency, Ma'am Nagmana?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
It's good to have you. It's a pleasure having you in this session.
Thank you very much. But can you hear me?
Yes, we can
hear you well.
Okay, good. So then we are all set.
Mariam, is Dr. Hussain here already? No.
So let me check. Please.
From Peshawar University here to join it.
I guess not, sir. He is not here yet. If
I can call him, please. Mariam, you have connection problem.
Yes, there is a delay, I think, an interruption.
Yeah, but she's here.
With him, so
we
he
are in the civil office. Mariam, you are muted. Open your mic, please.
So, Jordan, can you please check? We have more guests waiting.
All people who requested to join are admitted. So we have in total, I think, 28 people, and it's up to you when to start the session. If anyone will request, we'll admit him or her.
Yes, all speakers, Dr. Syed Hussain. Yes.
Okay, and IPRI is co-host of this event. So if you wish, we can start.
Mariam, can you hear us? Your picture is still.
Yeah, we definitely have some problems with the connection of Miriam.
Just a moment, please.
Yes.
मरियम को कहीं अपनी जगह बदल दे. मरियम को कहीं जगह बदले. Yes, Excellency, I think Mariam is changing her place. I think there is some problem with the connection. Yes, Mariam, can you hear
Yes,
us
sir,
now?
can you hear me now?
There is
Am I-
another microphone probably near you.
Yeah. Am I audible now? Is there any?
It's now okay.
It's so we're good to go. So, with your permission, Mr. Jordan and President, should I begin?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Warmest greetings and good afternoon. Apologies for my pronunciation. I would like to greet in Bulgarian as well. Dobar day, ladies and gentlemen. I, Mariam Temur, on behalf of Islamabad Policy Research Institute, welcome you all to today's webinar jointly organized by Islamabad Policy Research Institute and Sofia Security Forum, Bulgaria, on the subject of international peace and security, dynamics in the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific regions. We are delighted to have an esteemed panel of guests to speak on various facets and themes of the subject. To formally begin the session, I would request President IPRI, Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed, to offer his welcome remarks. Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed has held various prestigious command and staff assignments. He has served as an additional secretary in the Ministry of Defense Production. After retirement, Dr. Raza was appointed Ambassador of Pakistan to Mauritius, Madagascar, Seychelles, and Comoros. He has been the Executive Director of Services in the Army Welfare Trust, and he has also served as the advisor to the President, National Defense University, Islamabad, Pakistan. With this, I would request President IPRI, Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed, to give his welcome remarks. Sir, please.
Thank you so much, Ikra. Thank you so much, Mariam Temur, for your opening remarks. We can see you now and hear you now, but your picture is still, so maybe some problem persists. It's a great honor for me to welcome Mr. Jordan Bozilov, President and founding member of SSF and former Deputy Minister of Defense of Bulgaria. Also, I have honor to welcome Mr. Plamen Tonchev, Head of the Asia Unit at the Institute of International Economic Relations, Greece. He has served in Pakistan, so he knows a lot about Pakistan. It would be lovely to interact with him. We also welcome Dr. Syed Hussain Shahid Sorwardi, who is Professor and Chairman, International Relations Department, University of Peshawar. Last but not the least, most important and significant is Ambassador Naghmana Hashimi. She is former Ambassador of Pakistan to China, European Union, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Ireland. I also take this opportunity to welcome all those who have joined us from abroad and from Pakistan. Thank you so much for being here with us to discuss the very important and a topic of great significance today, which says international peace and security, dynamics in the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific region. We in Pakistan and in South Asia remain overly occupied with Indo-Pacific region because of the contestation between the two bigger power here and increasing alliances and possible militarization of this zone. But Euro-Atlantic is indeed very significant too. We live in an increasingly interconnected world. Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific are the two significant geopolitical regions which play a paramount role in global peace and security. Both regions are witnessing growing competition among major powers. Indo-Pacific region has become a realm of strategic contestation between China and the United States. A rising economic and military influence of China has led to a high struggle for global supremacy between the two great powers. The United States has been augmenting its strategic cooperation with allies and partners through alliances like Quad and AUKUS to counter China's assertive approach in the region. Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 22 has triggered deep crisis in Russia's relation with West. It has actually exacerbated the competition which goes on and the tension or rivalry which is prevailing in the world. China's military assistance to Russia and Ukraine war continues, due to which the United States has sanctioned several Chinese companies for supplying components of military use to Russia. European Union is increasingly focusing on Indo-Pacific region for trade, investment, connectivity, and maritime security. They view China as a rival as well as a strategic partner in the economic affairs. It is important to address the intricate dynamics and mitigate the challenges in these regions through dialogue and consensus and build more stable international order. From Pakistan's perspective, the US Indo-Pacific strategy emerged as a result of great powers competition, and it aims at containment of China geopolitically and geoeconomically. The competitive spirit of the strategy manifested through alliances casts a shadow over regional connectivity and partnership in South Asia. Pakistan's desire to shift towards the economic-centered security paradigm, leveraging its geographical location for trade, connectivity, and economic partnership, is affected in multiple ways because of this competition. It would be interesting to hear views of the gentlemen from across Europe and from here, ladies and gentlemen here in Pakistan, on these issues. But there is no second thought that both the regions are very, very important. And what Pakistan sees in the future is cooperation. Pakistan looks towards geoeconomics. Pakistan looks towards connectivity. Pakistan looks towards better relations with neighboring countries in South Asia. As Mr. Palman and Mariam were discussing about South Asia and people coming from South Asia and recognizing them with South Asia, there's no doubt in that. And when we are abroad, no matter which country you are from, you actually flock together. And here I would like to quote a professor from the SOAS, Dr. Shinadi Mukaddam. He said once during an interview to me that though at this time India is more inclined towards United States, but it has a Eurasian DNA, and ultimately it is going to come back to the region for more cooperation and benefit of the people of region and the countries. With these few remarks, once again, welcome. Once again, thank you for being here. And I hand you over back to Mariam Taimur. Mariam, back to you.
Thank you so much, President, for your kind remarks. I will now request Jordan Bozilov, President and founding member of Sofia Security Forum and Deputy Minister of Defense of Bulgaria, to give his words of welcome and also share his insights on Russia-Ukraine war and its implications on the regional and global peace and security. Sir Jordan, the floor is yours, please.
Unmuted. Now you can hear me probably. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Dr. Ambassador Rostam Mohammed, President of IPRI, for your welcoming words. And I'm glad that we worked together and we convened this interesting event. Thank you, dear colleagues from the Islamabad Policy Research Institute, for your cooperation. Dear participants in the webinar, allow me also to express my satisfaction on the fact that we put together this event, and we will discuss the dynamics in the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific regions and share assessments on the developments in the international peace and security. It is important because we are witnessing a serious shifting in all layers in the world order, which is by nature multipolar. The war in Ukraine, regional conflicts, how potential of radicalization and terrorism around the globe, new technologies, global risks, all this requires a deep understanding of what is happening and to look for adequate solutions. And that is why a meeting like this, where analysts and politicians from different regions meet, is very important. It gives us an opportunity to share our assessments, but also to understand how the processes are seen through the prism of different countries and different regions. And I once again thank our colleagues from IPRI, which is a leading think tank in Pakistan, for available long-lasting cooperation and partnership. And I very much look forward to an interesting discussions today, and of course to learn more from you about the issues we are going to debate. Miriam, shall I continue with my first presentation, which is about the Russia-Ukraine war?
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me share my perspective and my assessments on what is going on in Ukraine and what are the implications of this war on the regional and global peace and security. The war in Ukraine is the main threat to peace and security today. Russian aggression threatens not only the independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine, it is a direct threat to security in Europe and threatens international peace and international relations, which are based on generally accepted principles and norms, the rules-based order. We can't predict when and how this war ends. Both sides demonstrate readiness to continue combat activities. Russia still tries to conquer Ukrainian territory, while Ukraine fights back for its survival. All analysis indicate that it will be a long war of attrition, as neither side has decisive military superiority. More than 2 years after the war erupted, many questions remain unanswered, such as what constitutes victory in such a war? Ukraine and Russia define it differently. What does it mean to lose an aggressive nuclear state, to an aggressive nuclear state? How the peace will look like and how to achieve it so that is lasting and just peace. Ukraine defined it clearly, but obviously Russia has different objectives. One of the key questions, and perhaps the most difficult one to answer, is what the goals of Russia in these wars of aggression are. Very few people in Europe believed before 2022 that Russia would attack Ukraine. The thinking in Europe was that all disputes were solvable by the means of diplomacy and through the established international structures. Obviously, Mr. Putin had different plans. Russia had been preparing to take over Ukraine in a few days of military action. We know that Russia has even been preparing puppet government to be installed in Ukraine after the military victory and occupation of Kiev. The conduct of military operations showed that Russia had an intention, and still intends, to establish complete control over all Ukraine. Putin does not consider Ukraine as a legitimate state, but rather an artificially created one after the Communist Revolution of 1917, the revolution which established the USSR. He has stated many times that the collapse of the USSR was the biggest historical mistake. Moreover, Putin believes that Russia is a defender of true human values. Putin criticizes European values as decadent. He mocks liberal democracy. He sees Russia as a messiah that will bring true values to the world. By the way, this thinking is not something new for the Russian history and political culture. This messianism of Russia was argued in the Russian religion philosophy of 19th century, and Putin seeing himself as follower of these philosophers. Putin sees Russia as one of the poles of the world and opposes the current world order, which, according to him, is dominated by the Western countries, and wants to change it, with Russia taking the rightful place. Russia does not accept that some neighboring countries and former socialist states made their own choice to join NATO and European Union after the dissolution of USSR and the Warsaw Pact. Russia still thinks in terms of sphere of influence. In 2021, Russia issued an ultimatum to NATO to withdraw to the pre-1997 borders, which would mean the new member states to leave the alliance. This, of course, is not acceptable. Bulgaria is precisely among those countries that decided to join NATO and European Union, and we do not accept anyone to decide our fate for us. Putin sees NATO and especially United States as the main adversary and an obstacle to Russia realizing its global interest. I say this because it is important to understand what Russia's goals are in Ukraine, and that these goals go far beyond the current dimension of the war. Ukraine is not Russia's ultimate end. It is a mean, a stage for achieving larger goals. The NATO and European Union countries see the serious risk of escalation of this war and its expansion beyond the borders of Ukraine. Russia can and has the capabilities to escalate, including to challenge directly NATO and European Union. In their new strategic documents adopted in 2022, NATO and European Union directly identify Russia as a major threat to their security, along with the terrorism. Based on the risk assessment, NATO and European Union countries took several key decisions. First, to strengthen the defense of the eastern flank due to the risk of Russian aggression toward these countries. This includes deployment of NATO forces on the territories of all countries on NATO's eastern flank. On Bulgarian territory, there is currently a contingent led by Italy, for example. Second, to help Ukraine with all means as a way to stop the war and restore peace and the principles of international law. Third, to impose sanctions on Russia and put pressure to stop aggression. And fourth, to support partner countries, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and open a way for their membership to the European Union. The war in Ukraine has many implications. First, the war in Ukraine changed the strategic thinking in Europe. After the end of the Cold War, large-scale warfare was considered impossible. So European countries cut defense budgets and downsized their armies. Instead, European countries started developing armed forces for expeditionary operations outside their territories. Russian aggression changed that perception to security. Today, all countries in Europe are significantly rising defense spendings, increasing defense capabilities, and developing defense industries. Most of the countries spend at least 2% of GDP on defense, and some even more. The European Union and individual countries are developing programs to increase defense production. A potential war with Russia is no longer considered fiction, and the focus is on building credible deterrence and defense. When I say potential war with Russia, I mean kinetic war, war in the traditional sense, because we are already in an information war with Russia, a war of narratives, of disinformation and propaganda. We call this a hybrid war that Russia is waging against individual states, facilitated by the opportunities provided by social networks and new technologies, but also by vulnerabilities of the democratic model that guarantees freedom of opinion and expression. In Europe, elections are coming up in individual countries as well for the European Parliament, and the threat of Russian interference in these elections is considered extremely high by the European Union. Second, Russia's war against Ukraine has consolidated NATO and European Union. Countries are united to support Ukraine and strengthen their defense. Moreover, NATO expanded as Finland and Sweden become members. EU is ready to accept new member states from the Balkans and Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. For Bulgaria, this war, which is in immediate vicinity to our borders, as only Black Sea separates us from Ukraine and Russia, constitutes the biggest challenge to our security. Besides the purely military actions, there are many other risks and threats. I will mention just a few of them. It's unresolved conflict in the Black Sea region between individual states that can erupt at any moment, millions of refugees and internally displaced people, environmental problems, free-floating sea mines in the Black Sea, and many others. Russia also blocks shipping and freedom of navigation in the exclusive economic zones of individual countries under the pretext of military drills. So we have very complex security environment which has negative effects on economies, trade, tourism, exploration of energy resources, and many others. This war has also global dimensions. It is the most serious crisis in international relations. It is a direct challenge to the international peace and security, international organizations, and norms. The European security architecture that was built over decades has been blown up. Russia and the West have radically opposite interpretation of something that until recently was considered clear and mutually agreed upon. Globally, we have crises in institutions, norms, and principles. We have to ask ourselves, what is the basis of mutual peaceful coexistence of the states? What is the baseline so that no wars are fought? And my answer is that this is the sacredness of the territory, the inviolability of borders by other countries. Now we see how a country conquers what it is considered its own. This is very dangerous for the world because many other countries would be tempted to take what they consider theirs by force. Can we expect that in other situations, the stronger power will try to impose its interest by force? This portends global disorder. The global dimension of war is also seen in its impact on the global food security as Russia tries to block Ukrainian export of wheat and fertilizers. Next, it will be more difficult to find common approaches to global challenges like terrorism, climate change, etc. War is also a clash between democracy and authoritarianism. We see that Russia is trying to position itself globally in different ways. I mean, many countries around the globe are closely watching what is going on in this particular war and how it ends. What are other implications of this war? One is about the war per se. Not only Russia and Ukraine, but also other countries are analyzing and drawing conclusions about the future of war fighting. And this will have implications for the future of peace. We see that innovations in the technique, organizations, and conduct of military operations are key to success. Ukraine clearly shows how a significantly weaker state successfully defends itself against a more powerful enemy. Moreover, the war as well as military capabilities become much more expensive, while the adversary can use very cheap solutions to attack. Look at how Russia uses drones that cost a few hundreds or thousands of dollars to force Ukraine to fire missiles that cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. It is an asymmetric war fighting. Imagine this being adopted by more states or non-state actors. New technologies are entering the military sphere, robotics, artificial intelligence, which will change the course of military actions, and they will become more accessible. That is why we need a credible world order. One issue is of particular importance and matter of serious concern for us. This is the use of nuclear weapons. Russia is using nuclear rhetoric against Ukraine and against NATO. This is, of course, unacceptable. And in this war, one side, Ukraine, does not possess nuclear weapons. Actually, Ukraine has transferred nuclear weapons in 1994 to Russia, which has currently the biggest nuclear arsenal. Does Russia, as nuclear power, have right to aggress? We have to ask other questions, like what would be the defeat of nuclear power in conventional war? What does it mean? Would it resort to nuclear weapon? The current war can have various implications of nuclear issues globally. This is a risk that many players will seek to acquire. There is a risk that many players will seek to acquire nuclear weapons. And to conclude, the Russia's war in Ukraine is the biggest threat to international peace and security, the major challenge to the system of international relations. The war is still far from over and can take different developments, and we will probably see an even more aggressive Russia in the future if it is not stopped in Ukraine. We already witness repositioning of big players on the international stage. The world in the future will become even more interconnected, but at the same time, more contested. Future rivalries will not only be about resources, territories, and power, they will be more about people's minds and will be a battle of models of development and governments. In this world, partnerships will become even more important. That is why Europe will also be looking for partnership in a global aspect. I will leave this final topic to my colleague Plamen Tonchev, who is a well-known and recognized expert on the relations between Europe and Indo-Pacific, and he will share his own knowledge and experience. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mariam. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, for your insightful remarks. One second. It is my pleasure to welcome among us Dr. Syed Hussain Shahid Sohrawardy. So I will move on to our next distinguished speaker, Plamen Tonchev. Please allow me to introduce him. He is the head of Asia Unit at the Institute of International Economic Relations, Greece, and a MERIC's European-China Policy Fellow. He will be sharing his insights on the EU Indo-Pacific strategy. Mr. Tonchev, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, it's a pleasure to be involved in this joint event with IPRI and the Sofia Security Forum. Speaking of IPRI, I remember giving a talk in Islamabad at your institute back in 2004. And it's a pleasure to be involved in this event exactly 20 years later. Hopefully it'll take, well, not another 20 years to have such a joint event. But in any case, I'm looking forward to this discussion and hopefully future activities together. It's a bit, I must say, I must start with a caveat. It's a bit difficult to cover such a vast area as the Indo-Pacific within a few minutes. So what I could possibly do is merely highlight some issues and thus trigger a discussion, which I'm very much looking forward to. But let me kick off this presentation with a provocative question. What is in a name? The very term Indo-Pacific refers to what used to be known as the Asia-Pacific region in the past. And since the 2000s, this term has been increasingly used in a geopolitical discourse with geopolitical connotations. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the free and open Indo-Pacific concept, which clearly refers to China and is thus an expression of the growing strategic rivalry between the West, notably the United States, and Beijing. And of course, Chinese policymakers interpret the use of the Indo-Pacific moniker primarily as a US-led containment strategy directed against China. I understand that Pakistan as well has refused to endorse the concept of the Indo-Pacific, which is championed by the United States and Japan. And I wonder whether our colleagues in Islamabad would like to comment on this as well. I'd be very much intrigued to hear their views. Let me quickly tell you that I intend to touch upon three key points in my talk. First of all, the growing weight and significance of the Indo-Pacific. Secondly, Europe's stance towards developments in the Indo-Pacific. And thirdly, the big picture, including links between the Indo-Pacific and the transatlantic part of the world that Dr. Bozhilov spoke about a few minutes ago. On the key features of the Indo-Pacific region, the way we are seeing this part of the world by sitting here in Europe, is that, first of all, a key feature is the economic dynamism of the Indo-Pacific. Some key facts would be that the size of the economies located in the Indo-Pacific is considerable, to say the least, generating 60% of the global GDP and contributing some 2/3 of global growth, with its relative share of the global economy only expected to keep growing in the future. I can only briefly refer to some huge agreements, trade and investment agreements in the Indo-Pacific, such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, which was signed in 2020 as a free trade agreement between among 15 member countries. Notably, India decided to stay out of it. But even so, the RCEP agreement brings together countries which collectively account for about 30% of the world's population and some 30% of the global GDP. And of course, here in Europe, we acknowledge all these figures and the economic weight of the Indo-Pacific. Notably, the United States launched back in 2022 its Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, with Australia, Brunei, Fiji, India, Indonesia, Japan, and some other countries in the region as a bit of a competitive, framework. Well, I'm being polite, as a competitive framework. And of course, this is also taken into account here in Europe. I would say that Europeans definitely take note of all the different competing initiatives that relate to connectivity in the Indo-Pacific and across Eurasia, I would say. China's Maritime Silk Road as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. There's the STC corridor, which is being discussed now from the south to the north towards Russia. There's the new idea that was put forward last year at the last G20 summit of an India, Middle East, Europe corridor, IMEC. Europe has its own global gateway initiative. So there's a lot of different visions and competing, I must reiterate, on connectivity across the Indo-Pacific and I would say Eurasia at large. Interestingly, when it comes to China's Belt and Road Initiative, the biggest strand in its flagship initiative is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, with a budget in the range of $60 billion and a long list of projects, but also with some controversial aspects in terms of security and financial concerns. And once again, I'd be much obliged if we heard the views of our colleagues and interlocutors in Islamabad. A very interesting geopolitical point, of course, is China's investment in the Gwadar port, which is seen by many as a potential military base. And again, we would like to see what Pakistani interlocutors think of that. India, of course, has its own Central Asia strategy. Apparently, India is investing heavily in the Chabahar port in Iran. And this is a very interesting development, but let's see what the outcome of that will be. And of course, yet another interesting corridor in terms of both investment and geopolitics is the one promoted by China in Myanmar. It is quite clear that all these initiatives taken by Beijing in Pakistan, Myanmar, and Bangladesh obviously serve the purpose of bypassing some choke points like the Malacca Straits. And China clearly wants to have easier access to the sea, the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean. Which takes me to yet another point about the geopolitical significance of the Indo-Pacific. Because of its particular weight, we have various outfits, schemes, agreements and organizations, of course. I believe that Ambassador Raza Mohammed already pointed out, and he was quite right, the Quad scheme. There's, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, Organization, SCO. There's the AUKUS, trilateral agreement between the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. We know that there's always been a lot of tension in the South China Sea, but there's also been competition, growing competition between India and China in the Indian Ocean. So these are features of the broader Indo-Pacific region that here in Europe, we cannot simply turn a blind eye to. We are very much aware of these features, and certainly they are a cause for concern. Again, I believe Ambassador Raza Mohammed rightly pointed out to the militarization of the whole region. I would say, understandably, all eyes are primarily on China, with its growing defense expenditure, an ambitious program for the enlargement of its nuclear arsenal, the largest navy in the world, and plans for the acquisition of naval bases in the Indo-Pacific. Guada, again, stands out as an interesting point that I'd be happy to discuss. And there are indications that the Chinese are looking at a naval base that is reportedly being built in Cambodia. So apparently this is yet another parameter to be kept in mind. I don't want to spend too much time on what you probably know already. Let me move on to my second key point, which relates to Europe and its stance towards the Indo-Pacific. Of course, you will be aware of the EU Indo-Pacific strategy, but before that was released in 2021, 3 EU member states had already launched their own national Indo-Pacific strategies or guidelines or policies. And these 3 EU member states are France, Germany, and the Netherlands. France, for obvious reasons, it is the only European country that's a resident power in the Pacific Ocean. But of course, we are aware of all the troubles they're currently having in New Caledonia. So obviously that will be an interesting issue to keep an eye on. The Germans, they decided to have an Indo-Pacific strategy because of the country's global economic weight. And of course, its outreach to various parts of the world. And the Netherlands, of course, although it's a small country by any standards, certainly much smaller than Pakistan, the population of the Netherlands is less than 20 million people, and yet it is the biggest exporter in the world per capita if you divide the volume of Dutch exports by the number of their citizens. The Netherlands is very much export-oriented, so this is why they decided they also needed a national Indo-Pacific strategy. And of course, the Netherlands has its history in Indonesia and other parts of the world, not just the Indo-Pacific. The EU Indo-Pacific strategy, which was adopted in 2021, highlights 7 priority areas. And let me go through the list: sustainable and inclusive prosperity, green transition, ocean governance, digital governance, connectivity, security and defense, and human security. The rationale behind the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy is that while the United States has pursued a more security-based approach, Europe decided it needed an economics-driven strategy, and this is a key distinction. Secondly, bilateral trade between Europe and the Indo-Pacific region, which is home to some of the world's largest economies, of course, is very important. It is of strategic importance to Europeans. In 2022, over 1/3 of European imports came from the Indo-Pacific region. At the same time, Indo-Pacific countries, especially China, South Korea, and Japan, import some high value-added European goods. So over 40% of Europe's total exports in these sectors travel to the Indo-Pacific market generating a revenue of hundreds of billions of euros or dollars. Of course, Europe is very much dependent on the Gulf states at the western end of the Indian Ocean, mostly as a source of mineral fuels, crude petroleum, natural gas, LNG, and of course, this is a strategically important relationship in terms of, importing energy sources. Let me give you one more figure. I don't want to really bother you with too many figures, but this one is important. Roughly 40% of the world's containerized maritime trade travels through east-west shipping routes, which brings up the importance of security, the security of these strategic, it's called sea lanes of strategic sea lanes, slots that Europe is very much interested in. And this is where, once again, geopolitics steps in. And geopolitics, we must admit, has come back triumphantly. So Europe has to increasingly pay attention to security. Can Europe, and this is an interesting question, no easy answers, can Europe really secure all these strategic lanes of communication? Europeans' stance has been somewhat passive, but it is increasingly becoming more active. Not really in terms of military presence, but I would say not really in terms of hard power, but I would say in terms of military diplomacy. You can see the growing presence of European military vessels from specific EU member states, Germany, again, France, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, which is outside the EU, but still a European country. You can see a growing presence of military vessels, participation in military drills with some countries in the Indo-Pacific. I would say that so far, by and large, in terms of hard power and military diplomacy, Europe has been more of an onlooker, occasionally showing the flag, but not much more than that. And if push comes to shove, because I know that this may be one of the questions, if push comes to shove, there will be heated debates within Europe on whether or not the EU should step into the fray. At the same time, there's growing pressure and there's an intensive debate in Europe on whether and through what modalities the EU could increase its defense capabilities within the Indo-Pacific. What we're likely to see in the foreseeable future is that Europe could play a part mostly in the Western Indian Ocean and to a much lesser extent farther than that. Let me finish by raising my third and final point. I think that we should look at the big picture. The transatlantic part of the world that Dr. Bourgilov spoke about and the Indo-Pacific regions should not be seen as separate theaters. They are parts of a global geopolitical theater, and the two regions heavily affect each other. Up to the end of the 20th century, the center of gravity lay in the Western Hemisphere and the transatlantic relations. But in the 21st century, we are increasingly seeing that the center of gravity is shifting to the east and the broader Indo-Pacific region. For those sitting in Washington, D.C., China is the #1 threat the United States has to focus on. This is why the United States insists on some sort of division of labor in the Western camp, with Europe stepping up to the plate and helping a lot more, basically taking care of its own security to a much larger extent, so that Washington can prioritize China. For Europe, the war in Ukraine is a pressing priority that overshadows other regions, but this doesn't mean that the Indo-Pacific is relegated to the status of a minor issue. Far from it. I would say that Europe is increasingly paying attention to the Indo-Pacific, although the jury is still out on some key questions. For instance, what exactly Europe can do in the Indo-Pacific. There are still heated debates, and I'm not sure that there are some. I'm sure there are no easy answers. I'll stop at this point. Thanks for your patience. We'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tonchev. You rightly pointed out that Indo-Pacific is going to be growing influence, the greater influence in the geopolitical contestation, and it is getting to be a linchpin of the competition between USA and China. So with this, I would move on to our next speaker. He is Dr. Syed Hussain Shahid Sohrawardy. Dr. Sohrawardy is a professor and chairman of International Relations Department at the University of Peshawar, Pakistan. He would be shedding light on the Ukraine war and the perspectives from Pakistan. Dr. Sohrawardy, please, the floor is yours. Yes. Dr. Sohrawardy, we can see your slides, but we cannot see you and you are not audible as well.
Hello, is it now audible?
Yes, yes, we can see
Yes.
you and hear you as well.
Okay,
Yes,
great,
please.
great. Thank you. Now, can you see my presentation as well? I have shared my presentation as well.
Yes,
you
it's right there on the screen. Yes,
Yeah,
we can see you.
Oh, great, right. First of all, thank you so much, Ambassador Raza, for inviting me to share my notes on this subject, which is of paramount importance on all those countries that are situated on the periphery of this issue, Russia-Ukraine war. With my two fellows from Bulgaria, my both friends, let me say this thing at the outset, that we are living on two sides of this issue. We are living on two sides of the region. What particular region I'm talking about? I'm in fact talking about Russia. When I visited your country, I was a regular visitor of your country between 2010 and 2015. I was there for Fulbright Commission's, American Fulbright Commission's trainers. I was training them there. And when I used to speak with the people and I used to talk about Soviet Union's invasion on Afghanistan, like it was really very interesting. I spoke with the people and they said that, and I said that Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, and they were saying, no, that was Soviet invitation of Afghanistan. I said, what is it? Like, how come it's invitation? They said that was not an invasion, it was an invitation. And in my part of the world, it is invasion. So we both, once again, are in such a intriguing situation where Ukraine war will be defined with respect to regional perspectives. I am situated in Pakistan, you are in Bulgaria. So as is the difference between invitation and invasion, so will be the difference between my perspective and yours, but we will have our own discussion on this subject. This introduction that I believe there is no need for that. Now, so Russia invaded Ukraine, and then the war aims of Russia are still, I say that, quite remain unclear. With the passage of time, they are changing their narrative regarding why they have invaded Ukraine. Different reasons have come to the fore till now, and we see that this kind of an invitation, this kind of situation is making the things quite stalemated because the objectives of the war from the Russian perspective are not clear. One thing. Second thing, we see that this entire perspective can be taken from a theoretical perspective as well. well, like as I say that when I was studying this for the last 2 years, when I was teaching the subject in my department, international relations, we were describing it from the perspective of realist school of thought, which with more specifically from Mearsheimer's of offensive realism. And then there were certain arguments which were quite contradictory to what I was suggesting, that was offensive realism by Mearsheimer. Then we saw and we defined it from postmodernism's perspective, and that was quite fit with respect to the conflict that is taking place at the moment. Russia's very eagerness to control Ukraine in the midst of risky bet can be explained by the post-structural ideas as well. So that is also one of the thoughts that this subject is studied upon these days. Putin as a person, and then his actions can be explained through identity contests, like the way he was a very strong man during Soviet Union era, then he becomes a strong man after Soviet Union and during the Russian era. That also is important, and moreover, his definition of that civilization as Ruski Mir, which means one people. He is seeing it from that perspective, that we are just one people, borders should diminish, and we are one thing, one nation, we are one race, and therefore it's a Ruski Mir. That is also quite are disregarding their status as sovereign states, that countries I am talking about around Russia. So Russia sees the eagerness of Ukraine to join NATO through the lens of Russia versus anti-Russia. It considers that once upon a time, like we have been a great civilization, we have been a wonderful country, we have been a superpower of the time, and the revival is probably one of the things that is there in the minds of the hierarchy there in Russia. But at the same time, they think that they must be treated equally with the West. So any such Western-sponsored agreement, especially security agreement, security alliance, if it is coming into its strategic region, of course, that would be the time when they will lash back. So they think that we had given numerous cautions. They were not taken care of by the West, their alliances, as well as by the neighboring countries. So therefore, they acted and they invaded Ukraine. So as they have similarities in identity, like race, culture, and language, development of pro-Moscow groups have fueled Putin's this action to liberate them from as he feels obligated. So a kind of liberation is taking place. You know well that when somebody invades a country, they have so many things: democracy's promotion, liberation, and kind of things that we afflict with such kind of our actions. This slide that you can see is, in fact, a visual track of the conflict, which basically speaks about how this control of Ukraine gradually changed. So you can see from one slide it's Crimea, and then it is Kherson, and then it is moving on and on and on. And time was there when Mariupol was also occupied. Mariupol University is very close to my heart because of certain connections with one of my very good friends who is rector there. And you see that later on, entire this region, Avdiivka is also the one place that has been occupied. So with the passage of time in the last 2-3 years, with this conflict, things are getting quite tight with respect to the country that is invaded, that I say Ukraine. So this war is largely not yielding much to the either side. Some, like, one step is forward, so not two step backward, one step forward and then one step backward, one step forward and one step backward. So somehow that's why I wrote this thing, that it's not yielding much to the either side, necessitating the need of negotiations, peacemaking, and peace building. That is at the moment numerous countries are trying to find a solution of. A stalemate, as I speak about a stalemate, or till now my presentation is more or less like, okay, a stalemate. So Clausewitz, this his narrative is there that so long as I have not overthrown my opponent, I am bound to fear he may overthrow me. So this statement of the Clausewitz is from both sides. Thus, I am not in control. He dictates to me as much as I dictate to him. So our actions, in fact, are having a reaction. And that reaction, in fact, is also a kind of dictation from the other side. So we see that Russian side is quite dominant on Ukraine, but Ukraine's this attitude of not accepting that dominance is in fact a kind of a reverse dictation to the Russian side. And that's why I say that neither army is able to outright defeat the other. Russia and Ukraine are locked in a long war of attrition, which is fueling the stalemate. So when I question in this slide stalemate, I in fact conclude here in the same slide that in fact it is a kind of a stalemate because one step forward and one step backward is taking place. Now, this defense dominance of the Ukraine is also looked at in this presentation from the Clausewitz point of view, who wrote in On War that defense is a stronger form of fighting than attack. So, and that superiority of the defense, if rightly understood, is very great, far greater than it appears as at first sight. So this time we see that Ukraine, it is defending itself in such a manner that it is a kind of an attack on a great country like Russia. When I say great country, I mean a great power of the time. So remember that there are two very important and interesting things, and I know that all of you know that, but just for the sake of my clarity of slides and my presentation, great war and superpower. I'm not using superpower terminology for Russia here. I am using a great power terminology for Russia as a state here. So that defense of Ukraine, in fact, is a kind of, as Clausewitz says, a form of fighting than attack, and it is more or less equal to that. So Ukraine is definitely standing tall in this measurement with a strong defense against militarily stronger Russia. Morally speaking, at the moment, Ukraine is on a stronger footing because they are sustaining the pressure. Well, that is another thing, that they have full backup from the West, and that doesn't produce any question about whether somebody is doubtful about it or not. So the war in Ukraine, world is looking at it from the perspective that whatever is happening in Ukraine is not only about Ukraine, it is beyond that. So we need to see that if Ukraine is fighting a war of independence, or it is a reason for somebody's ego, or it is a reason for somebody's ideology, or it's a reason for somebody's expansion of power. So we can look at this, the first line of this slide, from both perspectives, which means that what West is doing and what Russia is doing. Russia is countering it, and the West is trying to be as dominant as possible in this region. Then we see that Ukraine is certainly a test of Western resolve and political will of many countries, because they believe that this is the time that they must expand themselves. Like European Union is a great success. Like NATO is a great success as far as security umbrella is concerned. In both cases, they are expanding themselves. Once I was in Bulgaria in 2003-04, and they were becoming the member of European Union. Finally, they have become the member of European Union today. I mean, like long back, but today definitely they are the member of Schengen states. They are members of like all these pacts and these things are there, that they are becoming. And this shows that the political will and the Western resolve is quite dominant in this region. So this conflict might be an opportunity for amplifying the Western legacy of alignment against Russia's supposedly aggressive and expansionist designs and democracy, but its effects are multidimensional for the rest of the world. This conflict has been sending shockwaves in energy and food prices. That is for sure. Entire Europe is affected by it. Other countries are affected. Other parts of the world are affected by it because of energy crisis. fuel prices are expensive, and therefore we see that international traveling has gone so expensive. So this also puts countries like Pakistan in a very difficult situation. I will talk to you about that in a couple of slides as well. This conflict has been therefore a checkpoint for the West to redefine its allies. Pakistan, with its legacy of alliance with the West, is now very careful regarding a balanced approach towards the both sides of the conflict. Let me define both sides of the conflict. Right now, once upon a time, Pakistan was with the West, and then again with the West. During the Cold War II, which means the Soviet invasion on Afghanistan, then during the war on terror. But now Pakistan has understood that global politics is one thing, as far as we are living in a region, that's another thing. We need to take care of global politics. However, at the same time, we need to take care of the regional politics as well. So in the past, we were entering into the global politics from Western perspective, but the moment we see regional perspective, we were at loss. We do not want to repeat that mistake. So for that matter, if we cannot be with the West, we must not be with the East as well. At least there must be a balance. If we are with the West, we are with the East. If we are not with the West, we are not with the East. What we are trying to do is to keep a balance, whichever the way. So in terms of the process, Pakistan is maintaining a strategic balance with respect to this issue. I have to speak a bit more about that, but before going further, just end game, I mean, if we are talking about it, that is, if we are talking about this end game, this Ukrainian episode, what is the very important question I have written in this slide, and that is, what end game do the parties have in mind? We need to understand that as well. And for that matter, just 4 points of autopsy, that is, Russia cannot annex Ukraine. Very clear, because Ukraine has full support of the West. They cannot annex it. What they can do is one step forward, one step forward, one step backward. They would welcome an end to the war because of its human and financial loss. Russians will do that. Because of and these costs are, as I say and I write here, are rising steeply. Ukraine cannot defeat Russia. That is also very obvious, written on the wall. They need peace to reconstruct the devastated country and bring home millions who had already fled from their country. Americans cannot provide an endless supply of military hardware, intelligence, training in a war that is not directly under Israel control. They have already a bad experience in Afghanistan very recently. That was concluded, and therefore they are not at all in such a condition to support any such a long-term war. War on terror has already diminished its stamina with respect to supporting wars in the world. So international community like me and you, we are also concerned about several and severe implications in the war that has for the world economy. Of course, that will be including Bulgaria and Pakistan as well, particularly energy and grain supplies. And remember that these 4 points I have taken as far as reference is concerned from our ambassador, Foreign Secretary Izaz Chaudhry. His writing has in fact mentioned that these are 4 very important points that we have to keep in view when it comes to endgame of the issue, that is Ukraine and Russian war. So Pakistan's position towards the war in Ukraine, as I mentioned, I just highlighted that. I'm going to ponder upon that a bit more, and that is that a major shift in Pakistan's foreign policy recently, and that is that usually we used to take sides in international conflicts. This time we are going for a strategic balanced approach, and this balanced approach is such that Pakistan maintains a neutral position on Russia-Ukraine war. Pakistan says again and again that that we will not be we will not be in support of any of the two. Islamabad has thrice obtained abstained from the voting on a resolution at United Nations General Assembly denouncing Russian invasion of Ukraine. Pakistan has repeatedly called for the Ukraine's territorial sovereignty, its integrity. Pakistan is compelled to juggle the relations with both sides while trying to secure a much advantage, as much advantage as possible for itself. So this reflects that Pakistan is somehow, my next slide is somehow in a dilemma. Pakistan is trying to keep a balance between the two, having normal ties with the two, and therefore I say that it is in a dilemma. And how it is in a dilemma? Prolongation of Russo-Ukraine war. This conflict had put Pakistan in a strategic dilemma amid increasing domestic and external constraints. Pakistan is economically suffering at the moment. Pakistan has energy crisis, and all this is having a lion's share as far as this war is concerned. So on one hand, this conflict presents Pakistan with an opportunity to realign itself with the West by its familiar historical presence that once upon Pakistan had, while on the other hand, this conflict can turn into a defining moment for Pakistan to reassess its historical alignment with the West and explore alternative options with other regional and global blocs for defense and trade. So at one end, Pakistan has the opportunity to realign itself with the East. Pakistan has the opportunity to get with the old alliance, historical, that is with the West. Pakistan has this kind of an option that it wants. But considering the shared strategic interests of Russia and Pakistan, new regional and global alignments, and the United States disengagement from Afghanistan and resulting loss of Pakistan's strategic position vis-a-vis the US, Pakistan is expected to continue its policy of neutrality. Yes, policy of neutrality towards Russo-Ukraine war, playing carefully on both sides. As I stated, and I repeat that as a small player in this larger geopolitical battle, the truth is that Pakistan will inevitably be forced to pick a side which Pakistan till now is avoiding. I'm going to take just 2 minutes and then I'll finish that. So the factors that are influencing. Mariam, is there something?
Can you please? Yes, sir. Can you please wind up your argument, please, because we have a question and answer session and we want this session to be interactive as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So factors influencing Pakistani perspective towards war in Ukraine is changing geopolitical scenario in this region, shifting of American foreign policy, focus on of America, Pakistan. They more are focused on our historic rival, that is India. Then certain other things, Pakistan's heavy reliance on US and Europe as they are the major markets for its exports and investors. These are the factors which are important. This slide shows that, as Noam Chomsky says, that wars can end in two possible ways, and they both are there. One is that through negotiations, war comes to an end, and the other side is and the other one is that one is destroying the other. So we say that since there is a very less chance that Ukraine can destroy Russia or vice versa, the only guarantee for sustainable peace is negotiations and peace formula that they can provide. A possible way towards peace is a viable Ukraine as a state, Ukrainian state, which was as it was once upon a time before the war, a security architecture that accommodates security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia. Avenues of negotiations like grain agreements must be kept open between the conflicting parties. We do not want anyone to die because of hunger and starvation. And access to humanitarian aid, exchange of prisoners, access to justice, especially economic justice, is vital, and ecological and energy security. Remember that all these 5 points are influenced. I have written it here, but they are influenced by, as is the point here in yellow, that President of Ukraine, Zelensky's peace formula, that has influenced all these 5 points that I have just written it there. Thank you so much. I stop here and I can answer the questions that would be asked with respect to the subject under discussion. Thank you. Over to yourself, Mariam.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soharwardi. Thank you so much for your edifying discourse. And I find there is a resonance between Dr. Soharwardi and Mr. Jordan's discussion that Putin is trying to he's trying progression in retrogression. There is a he's trying to get that bygone lost empire. And thank you so much for your edifying discussion. Now, not last but surely not the least, I would request Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi to share her thoughts on Pakistan's perspective on the Indo-Pacific. Ms. Nagmana Hashmi has served as the ambassador of Pakistan to China, the European Union, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Ireland. Her Excellency, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum to all the participants. First of all, thank you both Mr. Jordan and Dr. Raza for inviting me to this very interesting conference. But Mr. Raza is aware that I'm, to say it mildly, no fan of online conferences, because I feel that subjects as important and these discussions are far more meaningful when they are done sitting across a table. But we've heard the views of all our colleagues, and when you're the last speaker, you start wondering where to start, because most of the things that need to be said have already been said. So I will just sort of restrict myself to a few comments, and then we'll go directly into a question and answer session, because I have a lot of questions too. And so I will just make a small presentation, and then we can go to our question and answer session. Thank you very much. We have talked about a lot of conflict and a lot of other things. So I would like to actually start by quoting an ancient Chinese philosopher who said, and I quote, "All living things may grow side by side without harming one another. And different roads may run in parallel without interfering with one another. Only when all countries pursue the cause of common good, live in harmony, and engage in cooperation for mutual benefit, will there be sustained prosperity and guaranteed security." Now, this may sound very sort of utopian, but I believe if all of us try hard, maybe if we can't really reach everything that he's talking about here, some degree of calm and progress and cooperation can be seen in the world. Now, as I said, I just have a few points to say. There is absolutely no doubt that the world is undergoing profound changes, unseen in a century, with increasing sources of turbulence and risks around the world. We are witnessing significant risks around the world. We are witnessing significant political, strategic, and economic transformation. And it would not be wrong to say that the world is in a state of flux. The end of Cold War was heralded by the emergence of numerous fast developing economies in Asia, South America, Africa, and the phenomenal rise of China, strengthening the expectation of the establishment of a multipolar world by the middle of the 21st century. However, the transition from a unipolar to a multipolar world is a period of uncertainty, with the emergence of new alignments and new security and economic structures. And I strongly feel that this is going to become worse before it becomes better. So the birth pangs of a multipolar world will continue to increase in intensity till we arrive at the, at the desired result of a multipolar world instead of a unipolar world that we have seen in recent decades. These configurations of shifting alliances and the tectonic shifts in the regional and global balance of power have given birth to new challenges to the existing power structure. The fast-changing geostrategic dynamics are echoing the existing global security environment, necessitating readjustment and realignment. China has been perceived mostly by the West as a revisionist power, challenging the US global hegemony in all spheres. The US desire to maintain its dominance has given birth to the oceanic configuration and building new partnerships in the shape of Indo-Pacific strategy. This strategy is studied with the formation of Quad, AUKUS, I2U2, and IPEF, where India is being given a leading role to checkmate China. The US strategy has far-reaching implications for Pakistan in exacerbating India-Pakistan rivalry, pressurizing Sino-Pakistan strategic cooperation, putting strains on US-Pakistan's relations, and jeopardizing Pakistan's energy security from the Middle East and the oceanic resources. This configuration of shifting alliances and the tectonic shifts in the regional global balance of power have given birth to new security channels to the existing power. It stretches from South Africa to Australia, having parts of Middle East, Southern Asia, South Asia, and Korean Peninsula. Now, in these regions, there's nothing actually common in terms of a shared conflict. All have different security complexes. Africa is grappling with poverty and terrorism. Middle East is suffering from an unstable region, particularly after the Palestine-Israel conflict that's going on in Gaza and the unspeakable genocide and terrorism being perpetrated by Israel on a hapless population, and it has completely changed the dynamics in the Middle East, and certainly contains the elements that could engulf the larger region, including our region. So these are things that we need to watch very carefully. Then, of course, there are non-state actors both in Southern Asia and in West Asia, and now also you see them in East Asia. Southern Asia is dominated by India-Pakistan rivalry and nuclear threat. Southeast Asia has economic priorities. The Korean Peninsula is challenged by North Korean nuclear ambitions. And Australia has no apparent threat, but it's still part of everything that involves the Asia-Pacific region, or as our friends, the Americans, would like to call it, the Indo-Pacific region. Therefore, in the entire Asia-Pacific region, there is no common threat, no common issue, and has no common security complex. Superfluously, blue economy, environment, and free navigation are fashionable buzzwords, but these carry little weight in the realist perspective of international relations. China seems to be the only actor instrumental in building the new construct. China, as we are all aware, is an important player in the Korean Peninsula. Japan feels threatened by the Chinese economic progression and retreat at the cost of Japanese influence. Chinese growing involvement in ASEAN, its BRI passing through Southwest Asia into Middle East and Africa, its balancing strategy with three rivals in the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, 25 years trade and investment agreement with Iran, and Chinese inroads into Africa. According to the declassified documents released by the UN National Security Agency, China contributes the major national security threat to its global hegemony, not the UN, the US, I meant to say. Hence, building regional alliances is the paramount objective of the United States. The US clearly states that this intensifying American focus is due in part to the fact that the Indo-Pacific faces mounting challenges, particularly from the People's Republic of China. China is combining its economic, diplomatic, military, and technological might as it pursues a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific and seeks to become the world's most influential power. This is what the perspective of the United States of America is. Pakistan, as far as we are concerned, as you are all aware, Pakistan is a medium power, but having pivotal geographical position has tried to carve out its own perspective of the regional and global issues and the threats that is presently the world is faced with. Embedded in its national security interest. For Pakistan, its immediate strategic concerns are attached to India, Afghanistan, and the Middle East. Given the past and present US shifting priorities in South Asia, Pakistan does not feel comfortable with the US friendship, or let us say, or with the US alliance. Hence, the conscious strategic shift towards China is very obvious. Pakistan is not unifocal in its security policy, but Indian moves are detrimental to Pakistan's strategic calculations. Moreover, Pakistan has been propagating Indian Ocean as Afro-Asian region, and prior to its nuclearization in 1988, has all along been forwarding the idea to declare Indian Ocean as a nuclear weapons zone. However, under the guise of US strategy, India is being emboldened with cooperation in defense, space, and other defense technologies to promote it as a preeminent power in the region, which has grave strategic connotations for Pakistan, directly impacting its national security. Pakistan, as far as the US is concerned, has always had a very transactional relationship. From being the most allied allies and most non-NATO allies to the most sanctioned state. And our history is studded with disappointments in Pakistan of incidents when the US has really not come to our aid or supported us the way an ally should have done. Therefore, the US Indo-Pacific strategy is taken with great seriousness in Pakistan. And the US, and to add to this, of course, is the US-China rivalry, which is fast turning from competition to confrontation. And any military conflict between the US and China would be disastrous, as China is now not the power that it was in 1962. It is almost now, if not equal, very close to where the Americans are in terms of technology, political power, economic power, and influence in the world. So that will not only be disastrous for for the Far East, but also for the entire region and probably for the rest of the world. Therefore, developing countries, particularly Pakistan, will face severe challenges alongside emerging opportunities. Pakistan needs to navigate these turbulent waters with great strategic vision and political sagacity if it wants to successfully emerge from this flux as a politically and economically strong nation. While Pakistan-India relations are at their lowest, there seems to be no possibility for normalizing these relations with India in the foreseeable future, unless there is some forward movement on the issue of illegally occupied, Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And of course, unless there is a change of course, unless change of government or a change of course by the very fastest Modi government that we have seen in the last 10 years. Therefore, the coming decade will be the real test of political and strategic far-sightedness and a test of Pakistan's politicians and its diplomacy. Pakistan can live with the concept of Indo-Pacific as a geographical context. There is no doubt about it. But there is no possibility of Pakistan ever accepting the security construct of Indo-Pacific as is being propagated by the US, because there is no possibility of Pakistan leaving its defense and security to India or allowing it to be the net security provider in Asia, because India is now, it can be debated how long India will continue to remain the strategic partner and how long US will continue to support India. But right now, what we see is India being supported in every possible way to be a counterweight to China. We saw the Dolcom incident recently, and without understanding and without realizing that it is this region where India is located, that India is the biggest problem. Not only for Pakistan, we are the arch enemies of India, but also for the other smaller nations of South Asia, which it has bullied all along. So naturally, we have been a strategic partner of China for the last 73 years now. And I would, that's why we need to be face to face, because I really disagree with this perception that Pakistan has not been able to keep a balanced foreign policy. I think Pakistan has been able to maintain a very, very successful balance of power between our interest with China and our interest with the West, particularly with Europe, because with Europe we have civilizational contacts and civilizational interests that we share, cultural, linguistics, and a lot more. And we also feel that Europe, being a civilizational continent, has a better sense of history. And because of colonization and other issues, we have a better understanding of Europe, and Europe has a better understanding of this area, which, of course, the United Nations does not have. But we have maintained a very, very balanced position. And there are many examples that we can quote for that. Just like India had a very special relationship with the Soviet Union, and it still has a very special relationship with Russia, as was demonstrated by India in its relationship with Ukraine, continuing to buying oil and continuing to buy grain from Ukraine, and refusing to actually be a part of the Western effort in Ukraine. So we also have had a very important and strategic relationship with the Chinese right from the beginning. Now, just as USA is aware of the strong relationship of Russia, which despite it being an American strategic partner of choice, and sort of a check for China, they also understand that we have a special relationship with China that we are not going to compromise. And this is not the first time that we have faced challenges of choice, because, in the Korean War, we were asked to send troops and we were in alliance with the Chinese, but with the US, but we refused to send those troops. And we would not have been a nuclear power if we had not maintained that balance. So Pakistan has always maintained a balance between the West and our relations with China. And I think we will continue to maintain the balance, because nowadays, with world being so interconnected, it would be foolish to consider that the US would be our enemy, or Europe would be our enemy, or we would, leave our strategic partnership with the Chinese. This is a world where we need to come together and sort of act jointly to promote development, to promote peace, rather than going towards confrontation and conflict. But as I said, the way things are, probably things will become worse before they become better. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, I have very clearly stated that we will never accept the Indo-Pacific construct as a security construct. But we would like to work with everybody in the world, because if it comes to conflict, the conflict will happen in the Indian Ocean, and we would be affected. Somebody was mentioning Gwadar and CPAC. Of course, we have a long seafront. We have to also develop our ports. We only have 2 major ports. Gwadar is the 3rd major. India has 8 ports and wants to take it to 16. India has 200 small ports. They are taking them to 400. So we have been sea blind. It's only now that we have started looking at the sea. It's only now we are talking of the blue economy. So I think people should look at it not just from their vantage point of hatred for the Chinese and their insatiable desire of sort of stopping the Chinese, and put everyone who has good relations with China in that mix. I think it needs to be studied and to be discussed in a calmer and more intellectual manner, because nothing is a standalone thing. Everything is interconnected with one another. And as I said, there's not really much time to go into detail. I'm the last speaker. I'll stop at that. But there are a lot of questions that have come up that I would love to answer. And I would love to engage with, particularly with our European colleagues, because I've had 5 postings in Europe, and I was the longest serving Pakistan ambassador to the EU. So I have great liking for Europe, but I have my differences as well. And it has always been very interesting to have friendly but intellectually sound discussions with our colleagues. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Her Excellency, for your candid and stimulating discussion. Thank you so much. We have had multiple questions now. So the first question is from Mr. Nawaz. He is a research associate at Islamabad Policy Research Institute. And the question is directed at Mr. Jordan. He's asking, is multilateralism a threat to international peace and security, as it encourages the major power, that is Russia, to invade on other country, Ukraine, to strengthen and enhance its political influence in the world? I'm repeating it. Is multilateralism a threat to international peace and security?
Multilateralism as a threat to peace and security?
Yeah. It's multilateralism in its present form with, the 5 permanent members and America vetoing everything is a threat. But I don't know. The question
Do you
is
think Russia?
really not making any sense.
No, I mean, Russia clearly is threatening the established world order. I mean, for Russia as a big power and big nuclear power, imposing its own interest by all means is a kind of legally based on its military force. I mean, Russia is unchallenged power in the region, but this is indeed the question: can great power, can big military power be allowed to impose its interest by power? This is the question. I mean, Russian power or power of Putin in Russia is unchallenged. Putin can do virtually everything. Putin controls the economy, Putin controls the state, Putin controls the society. The issue is if there is no internal control, do we have assets? Do we have measures? Do we have even willingness to convince, to put a pressure to such a power to comply with established rules and norms? This is to me an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. The next question is. Please, ma'am. Yes, please.
Mr. Jordan, thank you for your assessment, but I would most respectfully disagree with your assessment, because as far as Ukraine is concerned, I think Russia was actually pushed to the wall, and it had no option but to do what it did, because there was an understanding that Ukraine is a red line for the Russians, and Georgia is a red line for the Americans, and this understanding should have been kept. Now, since the end of Cold War, NATO has extended 5 times, and EU has expanded 8 times to eastward. So why are you pushing people to do that? And as far as can one country be allowed to do what they want? Excuse me, look what NATO and the US are doing in the world. They have destroyed the world. What world order? The world order was put together by the winning parties, and if it was an order that was rule-based, if that was an order which was treating every nation equally, we would not see the Kashmir dispute not being resolved. We would not see what is happening in Gaza today. We would not see what happened to Libya, to Iraq, to Syria, to Palestine, and to the Maghreb countries. So please, let us not talk of it so one-sidedly. As intellectuals, we should put things where they actually are. And unfortunately, what is the international community? What is the world order? It is all being dictated by America, with Europe meekly following, because you have already sort of rented out your sovereignty to the Americans because of this common concept of security and foreign policy. So your foreign policy and your security is always has already been auctioned out to them. So their wars you are paying. And so I think what Mr. Macron said makes a lot of sense, and we must hear those voices. Macron first said that it is now time for Europe to have its strategic autonomy. Very, very important, because you don't make your foreign policy, you don't make your defense policy. So let's be very clear. Secondly, what Macron just said, secondly, what Macron just said also is very important. He said 350 years of hegemony of West and US has now died. So I think there are voices coming, sane voices coming out of Europe itself. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, but I would strongly disagree with the concept that some countries, particularly nuclear big powers, to establish red zones on spheres of influence, what Russia actually is trying to do.
What about Palestine?
Oh,
Excuse me, what is happening in Palestine? 59 or something vetoes by the US against the brutal massacre that is happening there. So
okay,
let us
excuse me,
not talk.
but
America is a
policies,
Point
nuclear
well
power. Israel is a
policies
nuclear power.
policies in the past
Let's
cannot
agree
be
to
taken
disagree.
as a
Let
basis.
us agree to
No.
disagree. Let us agree to disagree and move forward.
Yes. Yeah, we have plethora of questions coming in. So the next question is from Tanzila Khalil. She is a research fellow at Islamabad Policy Research Institute. And she asked, one of the long-standing demand of the non-nuclear weapon states is unconditional negative security assurances from the nuclear weapon states, which essentially means that nuclear weapon states would not use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against these non-nuclear weapon states. How do you think the active threats of use of nuclear weapons in case of Ukraine and Palestine have resulted in rising calls for nuclear weapons acquisition by non-nuclear weapon states in response to perceived security threats? How will it impact the nuclear non-proliferation regime? And the question isn't directed to specifically to anyone, so anyone from the esteemed panel can answer, please. Mr. Tonchev, can you please, would you like to respond, or Mr. Jordan? Anyone, please.
I mean, use of power or even threat of use power, let alone nuclear power, is a violation of agreed norms per se. I mean, what Russia is doing, it's a violation of agreed norms. The question contains not only a question, but also kind of a warning that indeed this situation in Ukraine and Russia's threat of use of nuclear weapon, not only against Ukraine, but also NATO countries, threatens the whole non-proliferation regimes. And I stated it clearly in my presentation that this opens the temptation from different actors in the world to acquire nuclear weapons, because it seems in this situation that only countries which possess nuclear weapons are kind of protected.
But America has walked out of so many of the nuclear treaties, so what are we talking about here? The order is being destroyed already by one bully in
We have another question from Ikra Hasnaat. We have another question from Ikra Hasnaat, the coordinator of this event. She is asking, Russia claimed that it is ready for nuclear war if US sends its troops to Ukraine. How credible are the nuclear threats posed by Russia, and how the West consider this either as actual or perceived threat? Is it an actual or a perceived threat?
Ukraine is not a non-nuclear power because NATO is behind it. Those poor guys can't do anything. They were never a state.
No. Ukraine is not a NATO member country. Ukraine is not covered by NATO's nuclear shield. No.
But you give them money. EU has just given them billions and billions. Americans are giving them billions and billions. Basically, America and the Europeans fighting Russia in Ukraine. I mean, come on.
Your point is well taken. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
No, just
Mr. Tonchev, I have a small. Yes, please, Mr. Jordan.
Just a couple of issues. We take Russia's nuclear threat seriously. We don't think Russia will dare to use strategic nuclear weapons. It is possible in some instances that Russia would use tactical nuclear weapons, but they're
peculiarities of use of these nuclear weapons, mainly because of the risk that pollution created by nuclear bomb will actually can be driven to Russian territory. So at this stage, frankly speaking, we don't think that it is imminent and Russia really plans to use. But of course, Russia does have this weapon, so we should not turn a blind eye to these threats.
My question is, can we turn a blind eye to this with Israel having nuclear
Mr.
weapons?
Tonson,
He's still trying to
quite some time now.
Excuse me.
Yes,
I will. Thank
Mr.
you very much.
if I can quickly step in with some 3 or 4 very
Please.
brief points. First of all, I appreciate the beauty of dialogue, including disagreement. As long as this dialogue is based on, solid arguments, right? I would say on Russia. Russia's always been a very contradictory country. And I would say that it's always been struggling, first of all, with its history. It still cannot get over the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is seen as the biggest historical mistake by both Moscow and Beijing. And Russia, of course, is struggling with its geography because it's actually Eurasia, isn't it? So I think we shouldn't look at Russia, in a black and white manner. It is very complex, very contradictory. And I would strongly disagree with the idea put forward that, in fact, Putin is looking at Ukraine and, and the aggression of Ukraine as a liberating campaign. Liberating whom? A country which has been acknowledged, which has been recognized, and which has been there ever since 1991 as a separate nation. Liberating whom? On the nuclear issue, nuclear weapons have always been there. I mean, ever since 1945 and the way nuclear weapons were used in Japan by the Americans. But ever since then, nuclear weapons have always been deterrents. This is how Pakistan became acquired nuclear capabilities following India. India became a nuclear power after China and India's defeat in 1962. But all these countries have always looked at nuclear weapons as deterrents. Russia was threatening Ukraine and the rest of the world with the active use of nuclear weapons, particularly back in 22 and 23, when Russia was still very much, in a tough position. It's now got the upper hand, but back then, Russia was threatening it would use nuclear weapons, not as a deterrent, and that's a huge difference. I'll stop at this point. No, please, Ambassador Hashmi, I don't think that the EU has rented out its sovereignty to the United States. I don't think so. Let's stick to the beauty of disagreement. The EU is speaking about strategic autonomy against the United States. The Americans don't like it. The Chinese like it because they see it as a way to pull Europe out away from the United States. But it is true that in Europe, we have our internal debates on strategic autonomy. I don't think we have rented out our sovereignty to anybody. Thanks very much.
Mariam, can I have a comment, please, on this subject?
Yes, sir, please, a quick one. Thank you.
Right. This is really very interesting. I believe that these two agreements, one is European Union and the other is NATO. When we go for an agreement, a part of sovereignty has to be surrendered to that organization so that that organization may remain strong and coherent. European Union's beauty of remaining strong, coherent, and so cooperative with each other is because of this. Now, thinking that some kind of a country, let's say, for example, America is coming over to hijack this all. That is not really, in fact, the idea. Basically, the idea is to be coherent together so that war may not take place at all again, as was the case with the European history. I'm like, they have always been at wars. But since the formation of organizations like European Union for economics, for like NATO for security, the wars have subsided in this part of the world. However, they are expanding themselves. Now, at the same time, now the question is, as I stated in the beginning to my my friends from Bulgaria, as I said that in this part, which means in South Asia, we see things differently. And from the Eastern Europe, you take things very differently. And here, we must be very thankful, honestly speaking, with the IPRI and Ambassador Raza, who brought us together, because we are listening to each other's perspective. Like, we think here that if Americans are getting so close to a farmer power like Russia, so close that they are getting onto the edge of their boundary, which means Ukraine, it just tantamounts to the Russian closeness to Cuba once upon a time in 1960-62. And what Americans were reacting, the way they were reacting at that time, is a kind of reaction from the Russian side. So what happened that they have invaded finally. But these things are really like that. I believe that there is a very thin line between the two narratives from our side and from your side. Let me give you another, Mariam, just last 20 seconds, Mariam. And then let me give you another very interesting kind of a comparative analysis. We have been American ally in the past, and we have some bitter experience with that. You have been a past ally of Russia. You have bitter experiences of that. We are condemning here, you are condemning there. So this means that we are coming out of those bitter experiences that we had in the past. And and this is really very perfect. I'm like, there is nothing wrong with that. It is quite fine that we are sharing our experiences with each other. I stop here, Mariam. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yes, this agreement is a good sign of progress. So we have a question, Mr. Jordan. It's from
it's good to be a little controversial because it just brings spice to the discussion.
Yeah. Yes. So we have a question from Miss Julia. She is from Brussels, and this is going to be our last question. Given the current environment of mistrust and shifting power, what could help a more peaceful transition? Would it make sense for the North and the South to discuss a new global pact? If yes, what would that look like? It's in the chat box if anyone wants to have a look at it. And Mr. Jordan or Mr. Tonchev, your quick steps on it.
Let me be very quick. A couple of issues. First,
Please.
we live in a very interconnected world. So this war in Ukraine, it affects not only Ukraine, it affects not only Europe, but it affects the world globally. So we have to find together kind of solution or at least approaches how to bring this war to end and at least start negotiations. The issue is that, unfortunately, to start negotiations, there should be first definition of principles on what principles countries will negotiate. And it's only about Russia and Ukraine. We can support, we can put pressure, but it's about Ukraine and Russia to decide how to go further. And one issue, we feel Russia as a direct threat to our security, to our economies, to our societies. I already said that we are at war with Russia in informational space. That's why we take it very seriously. European Union does a lot to push Russia to stop this aggression, but European countries believe and trust mainly NATO for territorial defense. And we take this very seriously because we believe that if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, the war can spill over to other countries, including NATO countries. I see Plamen is raising his hand. He's
Yes.
rushing to another meeting
I
probably.
think he
I
has.
apologize, but may I take the opportunity to thank all of you for a very meaningful discussion with a variety of views, and that's the beauty of dialogue. Thanks very much to IPRI and the Sofia Security Forum. I do apologize, but I will have to leave you. Please carry on. Thanks very much again.
I have to leave too, actually. So.
Thank you, Plamen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tonche, for your time. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure hearing you and having you here. And I would request President IPRI Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed for his quick vote of thanks, followed by Mr. Jordan's vote of thanks.
I'm very grateful to all the speakers, all the participants, and for a very, very candid discussion which went on. I wish we had more time so that we could continue. And as I said, as said by Ms. Nagmana Hashmi, Ambassador Nagmana, and also Mr. Plamen, that beauty is there in the difference of opinion and agreeing to disagree. I also take this opportunity to welcome and say a few words about our ambassador in Bulgaria, Mr. Mudassir. It's good to see you, Mr. Mudassir Chaudhry, Ambassador of Pakistan in Bulgaria.
Thank you very much,
Great
sir.
pleasure to see you.
Same here, sir. Same.
I will try to be as short as possible when it comes to Ukraine. I think there is no doubt Dr. Sohrawardy has made a very good presentation that there are three possibilities. We continue, or Ukraine and Russia war continues the way it is, but it will become a war of attrition, a stalemate, and we will be going back to pre-Second World War time when both the sides were there for the years and carrying out attrition at each other. But who is impacted the most? I think it is the EU, which is impacted the most, whether it is economically, militarily, environmental disaster, or financial burden. And for future as well, because the war, when it ends, it is not going to be end of war. The rehabilitation and cost of rebuilding is going to be a great pressure on Ukraine itself and other countries of the Europe. The other possibility is that the war expands in lethality. Both sides are aided more by their allies, and they are pushed to fight and continue fighting. But this is going to be a destructive kind of scenario. The best way is, I think, what Dr. proposed, Dr. Sohrawardy, a negotiated settlement, which is always likely to be the end of a war. US sanctions on Russia due to Ukraine war are not working well. The biggest example is the strategic ally of United States, India, who is our neighbor. They are not respecting any US sanctions on Russia, which have been levied, and they are continuing with their trade, import of oil. They're refining the oil and selling it back to the European Union also. Another important thing which I want to highlight is that Russian gas continues to flow through the pipelines in Ukraine. Despite war, this goes on, and Russia is paying a royalty to Ukraine, and Ukraine is accepting that royalty. So this kind of situation can also be seen. And if that is there, and if Russia is doing the saber rattling of the nuclear weapons, it means Russia is also willing to settle for negotiations and settle this war. How effective Indo-Pacific strategy will be is a big question, and I think we can keep it for our next discussion. How effective the Indo-Pacific strategy can be to contain China economically and militarily, especially when a bigger country like Pakistan, a nuclear country like Pakistan, is not part of the Indo-Pacific strategy or any such arrangement, even the economic cooperation, IPEF and so on, and is not member of Indian Ocean Rim countries also. So how effective this strategy would be when Pakistan gives an opening, as very aptly highlighted by the speakers from Bulgaria and Sofia, that the CPEC, the Belt and Road Initiative, provides an opening to China against the Malacca dilemma. We are worried about 2-3 bases of China, whereas other powers, bigger power, have hundreds of bases all over the world. About use of force to impose will, I think this has been going on. Unfortunately, one would like to have the word as ideal one, a global order based on the good thinking, liberal democracy, and win-win cooperation. But unfortunately, we cannot get away from the geostrategy, and the interests of the greater powers keep colliding with each other. And smaller countries like Pakistan become hostage to these rivalries and have to tread carefully through these turbulent waters. I think Ambassador Nogmana very aptly said that we have to go through these times very carefully, keeping our interest in mind and not taking sides with anyone. With these few words, before I end, I would request Ambassador of Pakistan in Bulgaria, Mr. Mudassir, to say a few words. And I thank you all. Grateful to you. It's been a wonderful thing, and we should continue with this. And I would propose that Mr. Jordan Bozilov will take the podium after Ambassador Mudassir to give his concluding remarks and say thank you. I would propose, Excellency, that we could enhance our cooperation further through some joint researches, exchange of the scholars and researchers. So thank you so much to Ambassador Mudassir, and then to Mr. Jordan Bozilov. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. It was nice seeing you, my mentor, after a long time. And thank you to IPRI and to Sofia Security Forum for arranging this show. It was a very enlightening one, and we enjoyed the beauty of the dialogue. I will not take much of the time, but I think that we should, I agree with you that we should continue with this event, and in future, I also believe, and I will also try my best here in Sofia, Bulgaria, that we could arrange such seminars between IPRI and other Bulgarian think tanks, and similarly Sofia Security Forum with other think tanks in Pakistan, so that both sides can share and know each other's point of view. It was a very good show, and I am grateful to the host and the co-host to inviting us and letting us be part of it. Thank you very much, sir. And over to Mr. Jordan. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for your kind words. We will definitely continue our cooperation because, as Dr. Raza Muhammad said, the world is not just black and white. We have to look at different perspectives. We have to know each other better. We have to know our perspectives and approaches better, because only together we can find better solutions. Again, I would like to thank you all for this lovely and vivid discussion. We can agree and we can disagree on many issues, but again, it is important to try to find solutions to this very uneasy developments in the world. And again, all these risks and threats we face, they threaten us in a different matter, but they threaten our security, our societies, and we have to find common solutions. Again, once thank you, Ambassador Raza Mohammed, and thank you, dear colleagues from IPRI, for cooperation, for working together with us on this event, and hope on future events and research projects. Thank you once again, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jordan, for collaborating, and thank you to all the speakers, Ms. Nagmana Hashmi, His Excellency Mr. Mudassir, Mr. Tonshev, Dr. Soharwardi, to all for your valuable time and your valuable insights. I would say Balago Daria. Thank you all. And to stay updated for our research products and informative events like these, please follow our Twitter, Instagram pages, likewise Sophia Security Forum YouTube page and Instagram and Twitter page. Have a great day. Have a peaceful life. Thank you so much all.
And thank you, Mariam, for moderating this panel.
Thank you so much. It was
Bye-bye.
a pleasure.
Mariam deserves a
So
thanks
much.
God bless you all.
for moderating it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Solvardi. Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms. Bye.
Bye-bye.